This is Chapter 8, Section 3, and in this section we will be adding and subtracting rational expressions. Now that's similar to adding and subtracting fractions. For example, if I had 1/5 plus 2/5, I would be ready to add those because they have common denominators. So my denominator would stay the number it already is, and I would add the 1 and the 2 on top. All right, that would be the same with subtraction. For if I had two fractions without common denominators, so for example, let's say I had 2/3 plus 1/4. Before I can add the numerators, I'd have to find common denominators. So common multiples of 3 and 4 are both 12. So I would multiply what times 3 to get 12? The answer is 4. So 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12, so 3 times 1 is 3, and I would get 11/12. So that's the same with adding and subtracting with rational expressions. If they have common denominators, I'm ready to add them. If they don't, I have to find common denominators. So for the first two problems, we see that they both already have common denominators. So we're going to go ahead and add the numerators. So we're going to write the denominator as part of our answer. All right, our numerator, we're going to put these in descending order. So x squared plus 6x plus 5. None of those are common terms, or excuse me, like terms. All right, so now after it says to find the indicated sums, it also says to reduce if possible. So I need to factor my numerator. I'm thinking of two numbers. When I multiply, I get 5, and when I add, I get 6. So that would be positive 5 and positive 1, because 1 times 5 is 5, but 1 plus 5 is 6. All right, so my denominator doesn't change. And now I want to see if there's anything that cancels out. So these cancel. I get 1, and 1 times x plus 1. My answer is x plus 1. Letter B, I'm going to use my denominator just as I see it. All right, so now I have 2x plus 1 plus 3. Since 1 and 3 are like terms, I'm going to add those. So I get 2x plus 4. Now I want to reduce if possible. So in the numerator, I can pull out a 2. So 2x divided by 2 is x. 4 divided by 2 is 2. In the denominator, do I have two numbers that multiply to give me 2, but add to give me 3? The only factors of 2 are 2 times 1. All right, so now I'm trying to see, does anything cancel? Yes. So in the numerator, I have 2 times 1, which is 2 over x plus 1. And that is my answer. All right, so if I don't have common denominators, I'm going to have to find common denominators. So that takes me to letter A and B. I don't know why my 30 didn't print, but I wrote it. All right, so on these, the hint is that usually when you are given a trinomial and a binomial, if I break this down, if I factor this, one of my factors is going to be x plus 5. I just see that pattern over and over and over again. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, well, let's go ahead and factor this. Do I have two numbers that multiply to give me 30 and add to give me 11? The signs are the same and both signs are positive. So my two factors are 6 and 5. All right, so I have this part of this. So what do I need to multiply this by to get both of these binomials? Or this one binomial? Well, I'm missing the x plus 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this by x plus 6. And whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. All right, this, I have everything I need. So now my common denominator is x plus 6, x plus 5. And now I have to multiply 7 times this other factor use the distributive property. So 7 times x is 7x. 7 times 6 is 42. I'm adding that to 8x minus 2. All right, so now I'm going to combine like terms. So my denominator stays the same. So 7x plus 8x is 15x. Positive 42 combined with negative 2 is 40. And now I want to see, okay, can I factor something out that's going to let me simplify the expression? So I know I can divide 15 and 40 by 5. And if I do, 15x divided by 5 is 3x. And 40 divided by 5 is 8. Now I'm trying to cancel. So if I brought my denominator down, would 3x plus 8 match anything on the bottom? It does not. So since I know I can't make anything cancel each other out, I can leave my answer like this. Or if I wrote it like this, it's fine. These are equivalent. So since these are equivalent, nothing factors, I could put this answer in Hawks or on my test and I would get full credit. Or I could put this answer in Hawks or on my test and I would also get full credit. All right, letter B. So if you have, the trick is when you have a trinomial, this is probably one of your factors. But on this, I literally have to multiply these two together because I don't see a trinomial here. So I'm going to multiply my denominators together, and I'm going to get x times x plus 1. Now, I could distribute, but I'm not going to, just so I can show you how it's helpful not to. So basically, I have this part in my first fraction. What I'm missing is times x. So in order to have my denominators the same, I have to add this part. So whatever I multiply the bottom by, I have to multiply the top by. All right, so what part do I have of this? What part do I have? I have the x. So what do I have to multiply this by? I have to multiply it by x plus 1. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. All right, so now my denominator is x times x plus 1. So now I'm going to multiply 8x times x, and I get 8x squared. Here I have to FOIL this. So x times x is positive x squared. Now x times 1 is 1x, and negative 1 times x is negative 1x. So this would be 1x minus 1x. So what's 1x minus 1x? 0. So I'm not going to write that part. So now, so that's the two middle factors. So now I multiply negative 1 times negative 1, negative 1 times positive 1, and I get negative 1. So basically this is the difference of two squares, and that's what I'm going to get. Now, is that simplified? Or actually, if I leave it in this form, it would cancel out this. Do you see that? These would cancel out. So I'm going to go back to 8x squared plus x minus 1, x plus 1. And now I can factor out this because they match exactly. You see that? All right, so then let's see what we have left. So what we have left is 8x squared plus x minus 1 over x. Okay? And that's the answer. Or I could drop those parentheses. I wouldn't need them. I could write 8x squared plus x minus 1. All right, so that is letter B. All right, that takes us into subtraction. So if you have P over Q minus R over Q, you're just going to leave your Q like it is, your denominator, and you're going to throw that subtraction sign up in the numerator between those two numbers. So that's what we're going to do with subtraction. All right, so this is a subtraction. So my denominators are already the same here. So my least common multiple, or my common denominator, is 2x minus 4. So now I'm going to always throw that minus sign up in the numerator. So this is 3 minus 5. Well, what is 3 minus 5? 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Over, now is there something I can pull out of both of these? I could pull out a 2, or to cancel this, I could pull out a negative 2. So 2x divided by negative 2 is negative x. And negative 4 divided by negative 2 is positive 2. All right, so now I could cancel out my 2's. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. And in my denominator, I have negative x plus 2. Or I could always throw that negative in the top. It doesn't matter. And I could put negative 1 and then positive x minus 2. I could do that, but it doesn't matter. Either one. All right, so then letter B. I already have common denominators. So my least common multiple is x plus 3. Now, when you have more than one, so here we only had one term, but here we have more than one term. So when we subtract, we have to make sure we're going to write the opposite sign of both of these, because we're subtracting all of this. So our first factor is not affected, but I'm subtracting all of 5x plus 1. And if you don't put those parentheses, you're going to forget to distribute that negative sign. So I'm bringing down x plus 4 minus 5x, and the opposite of plus 1 is minus 1. So now let's simplify the numerator. So x minus 5x is negative 4x. 4 minus 1 is plus 3 over x plus 3. Now I see that this looks like I could cancel it, but this whole thing has been held together by that plus sign, so you cannot mark those x plus 3's out. You cannot do that. This whole thing is stuck together. Okay, and you can't factor out that negative 4 because you can't divide 3 by negative 4. So there's nothing else you can do to this. You are done. All right, so I have a note on a common error. You see how this is written, 7 minus 2 minus x? Well, a lot of people will just not put those parentheses, and they'll just simply write 7 minus and this like it's written. And this is incorrect, because since that's in parentheses, you got to distribute that negative sign. So it would be minus 2, and then the opposite of minus x, this should be plus x. So that's why this is incorrect the way it was written. So be careful. If you have a negative sign, you have to make sure you have all of that in parentheses. And here is a way, I know it's hard to read because that circle is so dark, but basically this, like I was talking about earlier, writing this in parentheses, 7 minus all of this, and then you can barely see it. They changed that minus x to a plus x. I don't know why that oval is so dark. All right, we are moving on. So now we're going to subtract without common denominators. So we're going to have to find common denominators. All right, so the first thing we have here is the difference of two squares. So we're going to break this down. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 9 is 3. One gets a plus and one gets a minus. So that's just the first one, okay? Now the second denominator, I'm thinking of two numbers that multiply to give me 12 and add to give me 7. So what two numbers add to give you 7 but multiply to give you 12? That would be 4 and 3. Now this is interesting because we have just x plus 3 in common for both of them. So technically we would have to multiply this you know what, you don't have any problems where you have to multiply everything twice. So technically you would have to multiply the first fraction by x plus 4. And the second one, you'd have to multiply this by x minus 3 because that's what we're missing. And this would become a very long, laborsome problem. And I am 95% sure you don't have one where you have to multiply by 2 different factors. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive you don't in your homework or your test. So I'm going to skip that one. But that whole thing basically would be your denominator. And then you'd have to multiply. All right, but I'm going to move on because you don't have one where you have 3 terms on the bottom. Okay. All right, so just ignore that one. All right, so now let's look at number 2. So I told you earlier, I noticed a pattern. If you have a trinomial, almost always one of the factors is going to be the other one, okay? So on this second one, we're thinking of 2 numbers that's going to get multiplied to give us -8. But add to give us +2. This tells us our signs are different, and this tells me the bigger sign is positive. So I'm thinking of 4 and 2. 4 times 2 is 8. The bigger number gets the positive. And so together, multiply that to give me -8, but I would add to get +2. All right, so now this one is one of the factors. So what am I missing? Well, I'm missing this part in the first fraction. I'm missing x minus 2. So I have to multiply by x minus 2. Whatever I multiply by the bottom, I got to multiply the same on the top. So my denominator is x plus 4, x minus 2. In the first ratio, I'm going to distribute that 2. So 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times -2 is -4. Now remember, when you have a minus sign, you have to put that whole expression in parentheses because it's negative or minus 8x minus 1. And when I rewrite that, it's -8x. The opposite of -1 is +1, okay, over my denominator. Now I'm going to simplify the numerator. So 2x minus 8x is -6x. -4 plus 1 is -3. And my denominator is the same. All right, so then I want to see if I can cancel something out. Well, I could pull out a -3, so I don't think it cancels, but I'll just show you. So if I divide everything by -3, -6x divided by -3 is +2, and -3 divided by -3 is +1 over x plus 4, x minus 2. So did that help me? Could I reduce anything? Well, the answer is no. So both of these are the correct answer. So I left it, if I left it in that form, put it in Hawks or put it on my test, I should get full credit. And if I put this in Hawks or my homework, or my test, I would get full credit as well. They are equivalent. Doing this didn't help me, but unless I do this part, I'm not really sure if I can cancel something. So it doesn't hurt to go ahead and try to simplify it all the way down just to make sure the whole answer is simplified as possible. All right, so I've given you some problems and their answers. So hopefully you guys could do those. So if you want to turn off the video, try those on your own, and then come back with me and I will go over them. But you do have the answers, so hopefully you'll get them right without me. All right, so I'm going to do number 1. I need a little bit more room, so I'm going to use my notebook paper. All right, so number 1, I already have common denominators. So my denominator is x minus 1. The only thing in my numerator that I need to be careful is that subtract both of those. So I'm going to have 5 minus 4, and then what's the opposite of plus x? Minus x. So be careful with that. All right, so what is 5 minus 4? 1. I'm going to write my x first. So negative x plus 1 over x minus 1. So I'm wondering if I could make those equivalent. They're almost matching except for the signs, right? So how would I make negative x positive x? Well, what if I pulled out a negative 1? Negative x divided by negative 1 is positive x. And positive x divided by negative 1 is negative 1. Now, if you looked at the answer, if you thought this is the answer, but if you looked at your answer and checked it, you realize that that's not quite right. This is a right answer, but it's not in simplest form. So if you have it written like this, you realize, okay, those do cancel each other out. So the final answer is 1. Now that's a little tricky. You won't have anything like that, I don't believe, on your test or probably even on your homework. But that one would probably, confuse you just a little bit. But anyway, that's how you do that. So you want to try to make sure you get it in the most reduced form possible. But that one was a little tricky. That wasn't very nice. All right, number 2. I see a trinomial, so I bet ya that this is one of the factors of that. So let's go ahead and factor. I'll do it on the paper here. What 2 numbers can I multiply and get 3 but add to get 4? Well, of course, that's 3 and 1. So sure enough, that's one of the factors. So since I only have one of the factors, I have to multiply by x plus 3. Whatever you multiply on the top or the bottom, you have to multiply the top by. So we're going to distribute. So 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 3 is positive 15 plus 10x. Now we can combine like terms. 5x plus 10x is 15x. All right, and I bet you we can simplify that. What can we divide 15x and 15 by? Both by 15. 15x divided by 15 is x. 15 divided by 15 is positive 1. And I can see that something's going to, cancel. And so if you looked at your answer sheet or your answers, then that is the answer to number 2. Okay? All right, number 3. So we have a trinomial. This is probably one of the factors. I'd be pretty sure it is. So what 2 numbers multiply to give me negative 16 but add to give me positive 6? I know I have to have a positive and a negative. And the bigger number is going to be positive. Well, I could try 4 and 4, but I could never get 6 from 4 and 4. So I'm going to use 8 and 2. The bigger number is 8. Smaller number is 2. 8 times negative 2 is negative 16, but 8 plus negative 2 is positive 6. So that's one of my factors. I am missing x plus 8. I got to multiply the top by whatever I multiply the bottom by. And now I'm going to distribute. So 5 times x is 5x plus 5 times 8 is 40 minus 7x plus 3 over the denominator. You already know what that is. So now I'm going to distribute. I have 5x plus 40 minus 7x minus 3 over x plus 8, x minus 2. Now I'm going to combine like terms. 5x minus 7x is negative 2x. 40 minus 3 is positive 37. Can I simplify the top? Is there anything I can divide 2 and 37 by? The answer is no. So I am finished. That's the end. All right, that takes us through the end of 8.3.